My name's Nick Frank. Now, I don't know about you. When I was your age, I hated men's sessions. Something would come upon me when it was like a spidey sense. When I'd walk into a men's session and I'd realize that there was a lack of estrogen in the room, I'd get freaked out. Like I didn't feel comfortable. I came here for the women, and then all of a sudden there were no women. And I don't know what your experience has been with men's sessions, whether you've been to a session where some guy just yelled at you the whole time and said, you need to be men, and then you're just like, okay. Or whether it's something like, hey, don't play with that or you're going to go blind, and you're just like, that's too much information. Here's the deal. Here's the deal, is that today, my goal for the next 45 minutes or whatever it is, I just want to try to be real with you guys about what the world needs. I want to be real with you guys with who you're called to be and who God is doing, what God is doing in our lives. And so something we're going to start with is I'm going to invite Nate just to pray, to sing, to lead a song of worship. And there's no lyrics here, there's no song sheets, and so I'm really going to invite you just to pray from your heart in this. And I know that we're men, and I know that it's usually the girls who sing, and it's normally the girls who are comfortable with the whole Jesus stuff. But guys, if we can't do it here, if we can't practice our masculine heart, our masculine faith here, then where are we going to be able to do it? I remember when I was your age, I was at a conference, and there was a priest who was standing up here in a similar place, and he had the microphone, and he said, when men pray together, the gates of hell shake. And I was like, ooh, I want to pray. And I don't know about you, but I want to be who God's calling me to be. I want to be the man who God's calling me. I want to be so filled with the Spirit that when Satan sees me, when he sees the life and the love within my heart, that he's intimidated by me. And I know that that's a big thing to wish for, to dream of. But with the power of God in us, who God's calling us to be, even that's possible. Okay, so like I said, my name's Nick. I come from right down the road, Rockford, Illinois. It's about an hour and a half from here, so awesome, cool. Okay, so I'm from Rockford. I just moved there not too long ago, but I've actually had the opportunity, the privilege to move around a little bit. I'm from Ohio. I lived in Florida for a summer. I moved to Texas for 4 years. I moved over to Louisiana. Now I'm finally back in the Midwest. Much Midwest love. It's so great to be back. But let me tell you real quick, out of all the places I've lived throughout the country, there's one place that really had captured a part of my heart. And I don't know how many of you guys have ever had the chance to go to Louisiana or live in Louisiana or visit Louisiana. If you haven't, you need to go there. It's an outdoorsman's paradise. I loved it there. And when my wife and I decided to move there like 5 years ago before we came up to Illinois, we knew it was going to be a culture shock. We were moving to this small town in Louisiana called Cecilia. It had probably more sheep than people. It had like one blinking red light, and that was it. It had maybe 500 people, but in this town there were two churches, and they were probably 100 yards apart. One was for white people, the other for African-American people. It was a very active Cajun culture, deep, dirty South, and so my wife and I knew that we were in for something new. And so we did what we thought we had to do to enculturate ourselves to prepare, and that was when we watched a marathon of Duck Dynasty. And so we're like ready to move down there, and let me tell you, no matter how many episodes of Duck Dynasty or Swamp People or whatever I watched could have prepared me for the things that I experienced in Louisiana. You know, we moved down there, and we move into our house, and we're ready to do ministry, and I'm excited to get to know my neighbor, love my neighbor, all these things, and, you know, new to the neighborhood, Southern hospitality, I thought, okay, maybe someone's going to, like, give us some housewarming gifts. Like, that doesn't seem too unreasonable, maybe, like, a nice little fruit cake, some flowers. Well, one day in my house, my neighbor walks up to me, this guy. He says, here's your housewarming gift. Welcome to the neighborhood. Hands me a 12-gauge shotgun. Awesome, right? Best part about the story? Best part about that, he was actually the priest. And so he was like, go tell them kids about Jesus. And I was like, yes, sir, take my shotgun around. Okay, so that was crazy. The other thing about Louisiana that I wasn't expecting is that, you know, like school pranks, like everyone pranks each other in school. That's really cool and stuff, like painting each other's school rocks, TPing a school or whatever. In Louisiana, they don't have like minor pranks, it's huge pranks. And so I remember getting ready for a homecoming game, and they almost had to cancel the game because the rival team, instead of like painting the school rock or doing something crazy, they released 2 full-size live alligators into the football stadium. Awesome prank, right? Joke was on the other team because actually the janitor at the school just killed them, barbecued them, and served them at the game. That's the other thing that was amazing about Louisiana. But of all the things that happened to me in Louisiana, whether it was like the gators or the crazy people, there was one thing that happened that I don't think I could have ever really expected or prepared for, and I'll never forget it. It was a Saturday evening, and I was at Mass. And Mass was ending, and it's a small church, right? There's not a lot of people in this town. Everyone's neighbors. Everyone knows each other. And I look across the way, the pew or whatever, and I see this elderly woman staring at me. And she's got this look in her eyes. And I know that look because I've been watching Duck Dynasty, and I knew when like a Cajun had this look in their eyes, something crazy was about to happen. And she just looked at me from across the church and was like, yes, what's about to happen? And so I walk over and said like, hey, what's going on? She's like, he's here. I need you to come over. And I was like, okay, what does this mean? And so I walk over, she's my neighbor, and I walk over, she meets me at the back door, and she's like, oh, Nick, he's sleeping. But you know what? You still need to see this. I had never been to this woman's house before, but before I knew it, she had grabbed my wrist, and she's freakishly strong for an old woman because she's Cajun. She's been eating squirrel and stuff. And so she's like dragging me down her house on this dark hallway, and she brings me into this dark, pitch black room. And she pulls me into this room, and I trip over something on the way, and I think it's like a small dog or something. And she takes me to the edge of the bed in this small room, and she says, look down there. And as my eyes start to adjust to the darkness, I realize I'm staring at the biggest bed I've ever seen. And as they adjust more, I realize I'm staring at the biggest man in the biggest bed I've ever seen. And as I finally realize what I'm looking at, I realize the person in the bed who I'm listening to snore, who I'm watching sleep, is none other than all 7 feet 1 inch of Shaquille O'Neal. True story. And I'm looking down there, and there's Shaq, and here's me, and I'm like, I'm going to die. He's going to wake up and see a small white guy watching him, and he's going to take my head like a basketball, throw me out the window. And so I freak out. I just run home. I literally left the house. I ran home. I went to my wife. I said, honey, Shaq is sleeping in our neighbor's house. She goes, who's Shaq? And so I said, ugh. So I called my brother. I said, Chris, Shaq is sleeping in my neighbor's house. He's like, go back over there. I was like, oh, good idea. And so I walked back over. And the story is that Shaq went to college at LSU, which was like an hour down the road. And so he had gotten really close to this family who had also had some family there at the time, and he'd always stop into our small town in the middle of nowhere on his way to basketball games. He was on his way from his home in Orlando to San Antonio to broadcast the NBA playoffs a few years ago. And so by the time I walk back over there, Shaq's awake. And I walk into the house, and I see him. He's singing a Lazy Boy. And have you guys ever seen like the Transformers movies, right? Like, and the first time that Optimus Prime transforms from like the truck into the robot, and it's just like this huge, larger-than-life moment. The music's really dramatic, and the camera pans back, and it's just huge. That's what it's like meeting Shaq, because he gets out of the Lazy Boy, and he's like, whoa, I'm Shaq. And I was like, whoa. And so he takes my hand, and he's like shaking me. He's like, hi, I'm Shaq. And I'm like, hi, I'm Nick. He's like, so you're a church guy? I was like, you can call me Nick. And so we start talking and sitting there. He's like, hey, have a seat. And we start watching Ultimate Fighting on pay-per-view because that's what you do when you're with a 4-time NBA champion. And so we're just sitting there, Shaq and I and this old lady and her son, and we're just kind of having small talk. And it's great. I'm getting to know Shaq. He's getting to know me. But then one time, there's this one conversation. In between fights, he looks over at me. He's like, so you're a church guy? And I was like, Mr. O'Neal, please call me Nick. And so he's like, well, let me tell you. He's like, I think that's really great because since I've retired from the NBA, I've been doing a lot of soul searching. I was like, Shaq, that's awesome. Tell me about it. And he's like, yeah. Well, he's like, well, I don't really know what I'm looking for or what I'm believing in yet. But he starts going on. He's like, I've been reading books on Hinduism, and I've been reading the Bible, and I've been watching the Discovery Channel trying to figure out where the world came from. And I was like, Shaq, that's awesome. Great job. Keep going. And then he got a little weird for me, and he's like, you know what? I'm even reading this one book right now that denies the existence of dinosaurs. And I was like, Shaq, you're my childhood idol. Have you not seen Jurassic Park 1, 2, or 3, like Jurassic World? Like, they are real and dangerous. You are a big, slow man. You'd be the first to go. You've got to get on board with this. And he's just like, well, like, I don't know, just pray for me. And I was like, absolutely. And I think it's amazing to have that conversation with Shaq, and I ran into him a few other times. I'd always encourage him, like, hey, Shaq, how's that search going? Shaq, how are you doing? And he'd be like, I'm looking, pray. And the thing is that I can relate to that. I don't share that story in a way that's like, hey, like, I've got it all together, and this guy's lost. the thing is that I hear that story, I'm just like, man, I want that too. Like, I'm searching too, that there's something in me that wants to be known and wants to love and wants to know what my purpose here is. Because I think for all of us, and you can see it in Shaq, is that he had everything. One of the greatest NBA players of all time, all the money, all the houses, all the cars you could ever want, and there was still something in him that was thirsting for something more. And I share that thirst, and I want to know how to quench it. And so I think we search for that. As men, we're constantly looking for the answer to quench that thirst for our manhood. You know, preparing for this talk, I did some research on how boys become men, like rights into manhood. And I found some pretty amazing transitions, some pretty amazing experiences and activities that guys can do to become men around the world. There's this place in the Pacific called Pentecost Island. It's a small island in the middle of nowhere. And what these villagers do once a year on this island is that they take these bamboo sticks and wood and they build essentially like makeshift scaffolding, 100 feet in the air. And then all the men in the village will come up to the tower that they build and they'll look and be like, okay, I got that. And then the men in the village, they walk deep into the jungle and they grab vines and they cut off the vines. And then they go up to the scaffolding and they're like, yeah, this is about right. And they take the vine around their ankle and they tie it to the top of the scaffolding, they climb up, and they jump off. It's called land diving. It's crazy. And the goal of this is like bungee jumping, but with a vine. And if you've ever been bungee jumping, if you have, that's crazy. But if you've ever been bungee jumping, there's like give for a bungee. There's no give for vines. And so the goal of this, you would think, is like, goal, not die. But the goal is not just to not die. The goal is that you get so close to the ground that you can roll at the last second and your shoulder would touch. That's crazy. And you can watch videos of these guys just running off this tower, jumping, and getting so close to the ground. It's breathtaking. There was another village I found in the Amazon that what they do for their boys to become men in the village is that they have this right, and they go deep into the jungle, and they find nests of bullet ants. Have you guys ever heard of bullet ants? They get their name because their bite or their sting can be as painful as a bullet. It's actually the most painful sting that we know here on earth. And so what they do is they go into these nests and they smoke them. They like get them all like infused or whatever, and then they gather them all up and they put them in these makeshift mittens made out of like jungle leaves and stuff. And then they make these boys, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, whatever they are, stick their hands in these oven mitts for up to 10 minutes. And the boys are not allowed to make a sound as these ants start to bite and sting and wake up. And the thing that's crazy about this is that it's not just that you have to do it once to become a man in that village or twice. You can do it up to 5 to 10 times before the village says, like, you know what, you've had enough. You are a man. Welcome to the group of men. It's crazy. And the thing that I was doing as I was watching these videos on YouTube and researching it, as like I was sweating and like my heart was beating, my adrenaline was going, I was just like, oh gosh, I want to try that so bad. I want that. I want to do that. There's something in me that wants to prove my manhood. And in the States, we don't really have that. We don't really have just one feat that you do and you become a man. Right? Like, I mean, I think the biggest manhood thing that we have that's like, hey, you did that, is like eating like a 5-pound steak in 30 minutes at some restaurant. You're like, hey, congratulations, you're a man. You get your picture on a wall. But we really don't have anything that defines our manhood. And so we make things up. We think that our manhood is going to be defined when we achieve this, or we do this, or we do that, or this happens, or that happens. And I'm 31. And I've done a lot of the things that the world has told me would make me a man, and it left me unsatisfied. And I look back to my formation in manhood, my formation in manhood, because the thing is that I think we talk about manhood a lot as young boys, and we're pushed towards manhood by society, but no one really knows what that means anymore, or we've lost a great identity of what that is to be a man. And so one of the ways that we're formed is just by coming up with cute phrases for manhood. Like, how many of you guys ever heard this when you were like a kid, like real little? You're on the playground and you're running around and you fall and you scrape your knee and your dad's there and he's just like, rub some dirt on it. It's a good phrase, right? And so as a boy, I hear that, I'm just like, oh, okay. My dad said rub some dirt on it. That means I got to be tough. Okay, rub dirt on it. Boys don't cry. And then you get a little older, you're on the playground, and you're with your friends, and your friends are like, hey, do that. Don't be this is a church thing, so don't be a wuss, right? So we'll keep it PG. So don't be a wuss. And so you're like, okay, so if that means that my friends are doing it, and they say don't be a wuss, that means I've got to entertain them, I've got to be like them. Okay, so rub dirt on it. Don't be a wuss. And then you get your crazy uncle who's like at a Christmas party, he's like, here, drink this. That'll put some hair on your chest. I don't know what that one means, but it's better that we have hair on our chest than the ladies. So we have all these phrases that come and define who we are as men. But the thing is that really, guys, the truth is, and you probably know this already, that this is not enough. You look at where the world is taking you, look at where the momentum of society pushes you, and you're just like, man, I don't feel satisfied. That there's something within our hearts that just feels a little empty. That's feeling a little lacking. And as men, I think that God has given us a special call, a special strength, a special ability that we need to be able to go against the flow, right? That we need to have purpose. We need to have direction, because if we don't have purpose, if we don't have direction, we're just going to go along with everyone else. And if you want to know where the world is forming you, if you want to know where the world is pushing you, let me show you the formation of the world. Okay, answer some very basic questions for me. From the time you're little, you go to school so you can get good. You get good grades so you can get into a good. You go to a good college so you can make lots of money so you can, yep, whatever you answered, yep, and then you die. Like, that is the formation of the world, right? That is where we're all going, but what is the glory and what's the purpose in that? You see, my daughter's doing something right now. She's 3. She's crazy. And I don't know where she picked this up. I live 30 minutes from anywhere. I live in the middle of nowhere. And she started asking this question. I'll be driving, and I don't know if she thinks this is cute. And just in the back seat, no matter where I'm going, she's like, Daddy, are you lost? She's lucky she's mine. Just shut up. And so I hate it. I hate even my 3-year-old thinking that I'm lost. But the truth is, even though I might not be lost driving the car at times, trying to find my masculinity, I have been lost. And I think that there's probably some of us in this room that are maybe a little lost right now. And so we need to start to find that right direction in our life. Because, guys, if we don't have direction, you're just guaranteed to be lost. You're guaranteed to wander. And, guys, there are so many things in this world that distract us, that take us off the plan that God gives us. We live in a world that is so saturated with misconceptions of masculinity, that is so just blinded by strength and raw power and all these things that we just think that we have to be as men. But guys, that's not true. But let's just identify really quickly some of the things that we see in our culture, okay? And I'm going to go through this real quick, but do you guys understand how saturated we are in sexuality? Do you guys see how quickly this world is just throwing sex into our lives as men? And I'm not going to talk about this too long, but I remember watching the Super Bowl 2 years ago, and there was a commercial that came on. I was just like, what the crap am I watching right now? Do you guys know what a Fiat is? Did anyone drive a Fiat? Raise your hand if you drive a Fiat. Good. Okay, good, because they are crappy small little cars. And so there's this like Fiat commercial on the Super Bowl a few years ago, and it's this commercial where there's this old man, like old, and he's like in a robe, and he's like, and he walks in this bedroom, and there's like a woman on the bed, and she's old, like old. Do you guys remember this commercial? And she's like, ooh, yeah, I know, it's a weird commercial. And so he runs to the bathroom, and he takes a blue pill, or he tries to take a blue pill, right? I.e. Viagra. And so this is where mayhem ensues. He takes it in his hand, and he goes, whoops, and he throws it out the window, and it starts to like ricochet all over this little Italian town, like off this wine glass, past a Catholic priest, off the clock tower, and it just happens to fall so unrealistically into this open gas tank of this little Fiat. And then it gets really weird because the Fiat starts changing. I guess it gets an erection or something because it starts, I didn't write the commercial, it's just what happened. And so it starts to like expand and grow, and then everyone's like walking by the Fiat like, ooh. And then like the tagline is, like bigger, stronger, and ready to take you places. And I'm just like, why? That doesn't make any sense. Here's the rule. If you take away one thing from this talk today, if you need to give your car a Viagra to school in the morning, do yourself a favor and get a truck, okay? Because this makes no sense. You guys, the thing is that we are so saturated in that, and that's a car commercial. Can we be real for a second about the dangers of abusing our sexuality? Our sexuality is good. Our sexuality, our masculinity is good. The way that we are called to love is good, and the world is perverting that. It's turning it upside down on its head, and it's telling us that this is the way we're supposed to live, especially through the actions of pornography and masturbation. That's right. I said porn. I said masturbation. Ooh, those are crazy words. I'm also going to say boobies, penis, whatever. Any other weird words I shouldn't say? Okay, now that they're all out there. Pornography, guys, and I'm not going to talk about this too long, but the science is out. Pornography, we think that we're just kind of goofing around, we're just kind of hanging out, it's just something that guys do. It can't be anymore. Back in March or April, this magazine came out. This is Time magazine. This isn't some like weird offhand Catholic magazine like Overprotective Moms Weekly. This is Time magazine. Did a whole thing on pornography. And it talked about the dangers of porn and how it's rewiring our brain. How it's changing the ways that we are able to give and receive love. It's emasculating us. Emasculating us is a fancy word for it. It's stealing our identity. It's changing who we're called to be. And guys, you know this. Like, you know it. No one looks at porn, closes their computer, or takes their phone out or whatever, and is like, what a great productive use of my time. I feel so good about myself. No one does that because down deep, we know that we're not called to objectify, but we're called to serve and love and protect. Guys, this article talks about the danger of pornography, not just for you or for the women who are abused in that industry, but actually for our human race. Because they're finding that pornography is not just emasculating us spiritually, but it's emasculating us physically. Meaning that since porn has become such a huge phenomenon, a huge addiction in this world, that the cases of erectile dysfunction has gone up exponentially. Awkward. And I'm not just talking like with elderly people. The cases of erectile dysfunction between 18 and 25-year-olds is huge. They're saying somewhere between a fourth and half of all 18 to 25-year-olds within the next few years are going to have to struggle with erectile dysfunction. How horrible is that? How ironic is that we have been given this gift and strength and to love and to protect, to give ourselves to our future brides. And we jump the gun and we struggle with these sexual sins, and that we could lose who God has called us to be. Now, guys, whether it's pornography, whether it's some other sexual sin, whether it's bullying, whether it's not honoring your parents or loving your brothers and sisters, there's all kinds of ways that we fail to live into our manhood. There's all kinds of ways that we fail God's call in our lives. But here's the thing, is I don't want to focus on our failures. Because the failures that we struggle through, every time we look at pornography, every time we fall to an addiction, every time that we use our strength to abuse someone rather than to protect them, we are just falling into a symptom of what we're really thirsting for. We're just falling into a symptom of what we're really lacking. You see, because you don't have to do something, you don't have to prove yourself to be a man. Your manhood is not defined by something you do rather than who you are. Let me say that again. Your manhood is not defined by something you do, it's just because of who you are. Let me read something to you. This comes from the book of Romans. It's chapter 8. This is Paul speaking to the Roman people. He says, "For those who are led by the Spirit of God are children of God. For you did not receive a spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you received a spirit of adoption, through which we cry, Abba, Father." Let me read this again. "For those who are led by the Spirit of God are children of God. For you did not receive a spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you received a spirit of adoption. a spirit of adoption through which we cry, Abba, Father, or Daddy, Father. I love that verse, that we are defined by who we are as adopted sons of God. Now, let me tell you something about this verse. I didn't always get this verse. I didn't always like this verse because there was something in it that I just didn't quite understand in my youth a while ago, and that was that Paul makes this distinction that we are adopted sons of God. And, sometimes I'd hear priests or youth ministers or whatever be like, hey, we're all sons of God. But Paul was talking about like, hey, we're adopted sons of God. And I was like, I don't get that. Now, if you're adopted, that's awesome. My wife and I are looking into adoption. I get how beautiful that is. But when I was younger, I was just like, wait, like, can I just really be his? Like, can't I just, like, he accept me and as I am and my faults and everything? But Paul makes a distinction that's so important in adoption that we don't understand all the time here in 2016 in the States because we lack the understanding of what the Romans were going through 2,000 years ago. And here's what we need to understand why this should be so powerful in our lives. Why that we receive a spirit of adoption to be his sons is more important because here's what happened 2,000 years ago in Rome, in pagan Rome, different culture, different time. The Roman civilization had different rules to live by, right? And one of those different rules was that a family, if for whatever reason had a child that was troubled, that was burdensome, with no questions asked, the mom and the dad could take the child down to the city square, to the city market, and say, stay. And they could walk away. No questions asked, no responsibilities, no obligations. Hey, you're not my problem anymore. You see, but the Romans had another rule to counter that, was that, hey, if you were a Roman citizen and you found it in the goodness of your heart to see one of these left behind kids, one of these wayward kids, one of these kids who were troubled, who were struggled, who just were looking for love, and you saw them and you were like, hey, I will take you with your faults and weaknesses and all. I choose to adopt you. That if you had that kind of kindness, that kind of love in your heart, and you took them into your home, that by law, by penalty of death, you could not get rid of them. You could not do the same thing to that child that was done to them before. Once you adopted them, they were yours and yours forever. And so the Roman citizens would be reading this from Paul and being like, what? Shut up. No way. Wait a minute, God would adopt me. He would make me his adopted son. He would look at everyone and say, hey, I want you. You are mine no matter what, no matter how many mistakes you made, no matter what you've been through, no matter where you've been, you still choose me. What does this mean? Because their identity was found in the Father's love for them. You see, it's counterintuitive. It's counter everything that we're taught in society. We are taught that we are going to be what we want to become. That we have to earn everything that is going to be given to us in this life. That if we practice, that will determine our position. Right? If I work really hard on the field, I'm going to get that starting spot. If I study, I'll get that grade. If I work hard, I'll get that promotion. Our practice determines position, but not when it comes to our faith. Guys, if we can lean into this, if we can understand our identity, if we can understand who God's calling us to, if we can understand that our position as adopted sons of God should determine then our practice. When it comes to our faith, let's accept our position and allow that to lead to the practice. Do you get that? Because if we are sons of the King, if we have been adopted into this kingdom, a prince, an heir to the throne, lacks nothing, desires nothing, because everything in the kingdom has been theirs. Practice does not have to determine your position. The love of Christ allows your position to determine your practice. And so as men, we can fight the symptoms. We can struggle against the bullies, and we can struggle against the sexual addictions, and we can struggle against finding our identity. but our identity is found in love. Our identity has been given to us through the virtue of our baptism. The identity has been poured out upon us time and time again by Jesus saying on the cross, I thirst for you. I love you. I long for you. You are mine. A spirit of adoption I've placed into your heart. Guys, it's one thing for me, a 31-year-old man, married, kids, to say, hey, be a man. Hey, do this. Hey, you should think this way. Hey, you should do this. I know that I'm a little removed from where you are. I know that the things that you face right now are not the exact same things that I faced 10 years ago in high school. And so that's why I want to invite up my friend Josh. Josh has been serving this week with Lead retreat this weekend. Josh, he's going to share a little bit of his story with you because he is in your shoes. He faces the same temptations, the same struggles, the same everything that you have faced. And so if you could just give him about 5 minutes of your attention.
Thank you. Hi. Well, I'm Josh Hayes, and I want to tell you a story about how God helped me rediscover myself. So, growing up, grew up in a Catholic family, really strong Catholic, went to all my youth group activities, Mass on the weekends. And I just loved God with all my heart. But then, past 2 months, I kind of fell away. I became selfish, didn't really care for anything or anyone, and I even I doubted my loving God. And it got to the point where I didn't want to come to Steubenville or Lead. But it was already paid for, signed up, so I'm here. And so I got to Lead on Monday, and that night we had adoration. And so going into adoration, I just told myself, I'm going to let it all out to God and just ask him to fix my life. And so I prayed to him. I prayed the hardest I've ever had, and I heard nothing. And during adoration, I started just bawling my eyes out because I was so frustrated with God. I couldn't hear him at all. And so adoration was over. I just asked God, please give me a sign by the end of the week that you're there for me. And so I went to bed, still frustrated with God. I woke up the next morning. And that morning, we started our day with a talk and silent prayer. And during silent prayer, we were told to meditate on a prayer, we were supposed to meditate on a quote by Pier Giorgio Frassati. And the first 2 lines of that quote struck me. They were, we who, by the grace of God, are Catholics, must not squander the best years of our life, as many unhappy young people do, who worry about enjoying the good things in life, that do not in fact bring any good, but rather the fruit of immorality. And that really struck me because I realized I was in the pursuit of pleasure and not God. I was doing things that I shouldn't have been doing when I really should have been looking at God. And so I didn't really feel different after reading that, but I knew God was with me. And throughout the day, I started to grow stronger bonds with all my Lead members, especially my brothers at Lead. And we kind of formed a brotherhood. We were all looking for one thing, and that was God's love. And if you find brothers that are all looking for God's love, the bond will be stronger than you've ever felt. And so I just invite you that anytime you're feeling down or you just don't feel like you have God by your side, you doubt his love, just pour it all out. Just give it all back to him. He'll help you through it. Just ask for a sign. He wants to bring you back. That's it.
Thanks so much, dude. I love hearing the story of young men. the story of men who are coming to the front lines for the first time. And I don't know where you are, what battles you're facing, what you're struggling with, where you find your identity, or where you've maybe lost your identity somewhere along the way. But the thing that I do know is that none of us in this room, whether you're 50 or 15, can do it on our own. And I love Josh's story because he was talking about the brothers that he experienced this week at Lead who brought him back to the Lord, who walked with him throughout this week, and those relationships that are going to continue to carry him. I remember when I was his age, I did something similar to Lead. It was called Young Apostles, and some of those guys are still some of my closest friends that I met over that weekend. I still have brothers in my life who call me on. When I was in college, I met this guy named Mark. And we started doing this thing. We realized, hey, we have similar needs, similar struggles, similar desires. Can we keep each other accountable? Can we go to bat for each other? Can we support each other through this life? And so for 3 years through college, every Monday we would grab coffee. And we'd say, hey, man, how you doing? What's going on? Where are the victories? Where are the temptations? Where are the struggles? And he helped me through so much in those 3 years. After college, he went his way, I went my way. But the brotherhood and the support has not stopped. We might not be able to sit down and get coffee every week, but every Monday morning still I get a phone call. Hey, Mark, how you doing? Where's your victories? Where's your struggles? How can we pray for each other? Guys, we need each other. If you don't know that now, you will know that soon enough. I read this scripture earlier from Mark chapter 2 with the healing of the paralytic. The guy who was paralyzed being lowered down through the ceiling by these 4 men. I love this story in reference to brotherhood, because it doesn't really tell us a lot about any of these men. The really only thing that we know about the paralytic is that he's paralyzed. We don't know if he's friends with these 4 guys, or 4 guys are like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we did that? But we do know that without those 4 guys, God's grace and God's power would not have been known. And if you read closely in Scripture, Jesus says this. After they lowered him down to the floor, when Jesus saw their faith, the faith of these 4 guys, he then looked down to the paralytic and said, child, your sins are forgiven. Guys, we need each other. You need accountability in your life. You need brotherhood. I'm actually going to invite the ushers to pass out some cards at this time. They're going to pass out these cards that are hopefully going to be something that you take seriously. That these cards on them have a prayer that we're going to pray in a minute. And you don't need to sign it right now. But what this card is all about is about finding someone in your life, whether it's the person sitting next to you, a youth minister, a priest, a dad, someone in your life who's going to be dedicated to walking beside you. And what I want you to do, not right now, is I want you to pray about who in your life God might be offering to you as a brother. Who in your life would be willing to walk with you? And then if they're here this weekend, I want you to sign that card and give it to them. To say, hey, I need you. Will you be my support? Will you be my brother? Will we check in on each other? Will you pray for me? We all need this. And what I want you guys to do is to make a battle plan. To make a plan of, okay, here is how we're going to fight. We're in this together. I have your back, you have my back. I'm going to call you a week from today. I'm going to call you every Wednesday. I'm going to call you every morning that I'm struggling. I'm going to take you out for coffee after youth group on Sunday, and we're going to touch base. Whatever it is, and be practical. Don't just say, hey, let's pray. Hey, I'm praying for you. Be honest with each other. If you're struggling with porn, figure out how you're going to fight it. Whether that's putting an accountability software on your phone or computer like Covenant Eyes, whether it's saying, hey, we're both going to pray 3 Hail Marys a day for each other, that she would protect our purity. I need you to be practical. And what we're going to do now as brothers, as men, is we're going to try to take that first step towards accountability. We're going to take that first step towards manhood and towards brotherhood. And I'm just going to invite that we all pray together. That we're going to break up into groups of 3, no more than 4. And we're going to start to develop this battle plan or this routine of prayer that will safeguard and lead us further into the heart of Christ, that we accept our position that will start to determine our practices. I'm serious about the accountability. I'm serious about the card that we're given. As iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another man. You need someone in your life. And so take it seriously over these next few days together, over these next few hours. Talk to your youth minister, talk to your friends, put a practical battle plan into place. You need it more than you realize. I need it more than I realize at times. And so let's just take the step here while we're here at this conference in a safe place to put the plan in action, to take that first step and to make it happen. Cool?